Kia ora koutou, welcome to the Pivot Reports. I'm Russell Brown. Something interesting happened during the COVID lockdown. We got cleaner. Air pollution and carbon emissions plummeted. We stopped throwing things into landfill for a bit, and many of us dragged out the bikes in the back of the garage and went for a ride on the wide, empty roads. What if the recovered, healthy economy could look a bit more like that? Could we be better? That's the vision of the sustainable business community, and many of those businesses spent the COVID pause thinking about ways to get there. I'm joined in this episode by the CEO of the Sustainable Business Network, Rachel Brown, the co-founder of Auckland's Big Street Bikers, Cleve, the founder and CEO of ethical fashion brand Little Yellow Bird, Samantha Jones, and Fionna Gotts of Junk Run, the company that takes your waste to a better place. Welcome to you all, and welcome to you viewers as well. If you have any questions, just pop them in the comments for the stream and I will see them when we get to towards the end of the show. Now, Rachel, if we could start with you for the big picture. Your members include many small businesses. How have they been faring?
Yeah, well, there's not one way that people are faring at the moment. So to be completely honest, we rang all our members to find out how they were doing. And it's pretty much complete opposite. So some people have had an absolutely appalling time through COVID. Those especially who are focused on tourism and hospitality have been it's been really stressful. So particularly if you're investing in your business and retail, if you don't have online retail. To the other extreme, which are the companies that are in places like food or online sales, and they've been going completely mental. And so they've had the other extreme where they've just been working extraordinarily hard. And then there's a group in the middle who are kind of sitting and going, okay, things have massively changed. Now what do we do? And some of the people today are those kinds of folks who have kind of pivoted to work out what's the role that they play in these kind of conditions. So no one.
So it was a chance for some thought for some of them.
Absolutely. And I think we're going to see more and more changes coming out of this time. This is a really big time for innovation for those who are innovative.
You haven't been idle on that front, I must say. Back in April, you sent a letter to senior government ministers asking for several initiatives as part of recovery spending. Can you summarise that for me?
Yeah, so I was talking to Cleve about this offline, but basically what was happening was people were coming to SBN and saying, okay, we're in this time. Now what do we tell government to do? They're about to unleash the biggest, budget they've ever pulled out of thin air from our kids. And what do we ask them to do? So we kind of boiled it down. We had kind of 9 themes as we started, Russell, and then we boiled it down to 5 critical themes. But overall, what we were trying to get the government to think about was the system that we currently operate is fundamentally flawed. We've created an inequality that's massive, and so we're kind of pooling wealth amongst the really wealthy, but we're also eroding natural systems at the same time. So the overall thing was to think about a system, a wider system from all institutions that's more redistributive, so that we distribute wealth rather than pool it, and also regenerating systems, natural systems, but also some of the social systems that we've got. So then based on that, we said the first principle must be we stop polluting as a fundamental thing. So we've got to stop polluting through carbon, through water, and through waste. That was a really important thing, get those systems lined up for the long term. The other one was make sure that we could actually pull together some partnerships so that we could start regenerating nature. So some of them were about literally tree planting, and then other bits were really about how do we use an infrastructure in a way that isn't just turning our waterways into pipes to push water out into our oceans, for example. There's a heap of innovation there, but we don't use it. And so planting was still important, but also how do we get a greener infrastructure in? Then a really important thing is that we've done things the same way for a long time, so we need to re-skill people. So there was a big piece in there about re-skilling people for future thinking. So instead of thinking you design things to get thrown into the rubbish tip, how do you redesign things so that you're not doing that? A really big thing in there was around food. New Zealand grows a lot of food, we export a lot of food, but at the moment our food is showcasing that to the world. And then the last one was taking serious action on climate. There's a lot of big businesses talking about it. There's a lot of tick boxing. We want to get our New Zealand SMEs to lead the way. So we're creating a big project around climate action for New Zealand's SMEs. So we put that in. Some of it's actually come out of the budget, but not at the scale we were hoping it would be honest. There's still 20 billion to go. So we want to keep pushing that gets spent in the right place.
I guess there are some business owners who are going to be watching this and thinking, well, what's in it for business? These are all fine things, but how is this good for my business?
They're all fundamentally important for business. So it depends which area you're in, but these guys will talk about some of it. But at the moment, this is the first massive disruption we've experienced, Russell. There will be more. New Zealand is a unique place. We're miles away from everywhere. Future disruptions, we might get another, we're very likely to get another COVID type thing hit us. We've had plenty in the past. They just haven't had this kind of pandemic scale in my lifetime anyway. And then there'll be climate-related disruptions that come through. So business needs to understand that we have to make sure that our country is resilient, which is why we need to think about a regenerative thing. We also need to rebuild our natural environment so it can weather these kind of storms. We're getting more droughts, we're getting more massive disruptions coming through. If business doesn't have that fundamental thing, we will struggle. So there's something about setting up New Zealand as a nation so that we can do good business, but we then also has to think about what business needs to do to be more resilient.
I guess, I mean, if you look at it now, Auckland's still teetering on the edge of a water crisis. Is that the kind of challenge you're talking about?
Absolutely, not just Auckland. You know, the Hawke's Bay, the Waikato, we have really serious climate issues hitting us now. And we're kind of just going, pretend it's not happening. We'll find other water sources. But we're not actually talking to business or to individual householders about what do we need to do to conserve water. We've never really done it. But other parts of the world, if you go to places that are drier, they're very good at it. We're terrible. Yes.
People can and have written whole books on this, but you boiled it down to 5 key principles. Was it important to simplify it to that degree, to make it that clear?
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I love systems. So those things make sense to me. Everything is connected. You know, everything is connected. So if you change one thing, something else over here changes, then you don't always know what your outcomes are going to be. But if you keep it really complicated, people freeze. So we had to get down to, you know, as simple a set of systems as we can. And underneath that sits the detail, really.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. I'll come back to you later on to pick up on some of the themes our guests raised. But Cleve Cameron of Big Street Bikers, as I mentioned, everyone got out on their bikes. A bit of an ironic time to have to close, wasn't it?
Yeah, there were, without a doubt, the phone was ringing hot saying, hey, can I borrow a bike? Can I hire a bike? Can I buy a bike? Can I get a bike? Oh, you know, we want to get out. And it was like, oh, can you just hold fire? But what's happened though is it's just the love affair has begun with people riding their bikes again, and they've had a taste of the fresh air and the peace of mind that they have when they're riding around, and the general love of life that you get from hooning around on a bike as opposed to sitting in a metal slug on the highway.
So were you able to work on anything new during the pause?
Yeah, we had a couple of ideas. Our major play, which we were fortunate enough to be able to keep working on, funnily enough, we were scheduled to start installing what we call the Locky network in Christchurch, literally the day before we went into lockdown. We were set to go and break ground in Christchurch, but fortunately at level 3 we were able to have contractors out and start doing that. So our team in Christchurch have been busy as installing the world's first Locky network, which is going to be launched on Thursday.
So what's a Locky dock? Tell us what a Locky dock is.
Yeah, great. Good question.
Cool name, but...
Yeah, cheers. It's so it's where you can lock, dock, and recharge your bike, a normal bike, an electric scooter, electric skateboard, or hovercraft. But what we've done is we've pulled together technology from around the world and put it together in a new way to created a model so that it's free to the public and free to property owners, because to be able to access this infrastructure, so electric, micro mobility, recharging infrastructure with secure parking. So to remove those barriers of cost and so on, and to create convenience of secure parking and charging around the city. So we've got 10 docks going in Christchurch. I shouldn't say too much more about that because it's going to be all talked about on Thursday.
Okay, so it's free, which is great, but who's paying for it?
There's a media model. So there's 10 lock docks, and there's a digital screen that goes on the end of it. We have a double-sided, and on one side of the screen are maps that show people where the bike paths are, and the NZTA is supporting that, Waka Kotahi, and on the other side is advertising, which supports the whole thing. We've made a simple kaupapa around the network media there, and we work with Phantom Bill stickers to run the advertising on there, but we've said no fossil fuel advertising. And we just want to go, okay, this is our chance to draw a line in the sand and create a healthy carbon zero transport network, and let's run true to that.
So it's kind of important there was a values alignment with your media partner there.
100%, yeah.
What I'm interested in is, as a small company, you've always been really confident about partnering with larger organisations. You mentioned the NZTA. You've had a lot of work with Mercury. Is that, it seems like a good way to amplify what you're doing. As a small company, you can actually get your kaupapa a lot further.
Yeah. And what we've found is that within big organisations, there's a lot of people with shared values. And so what we have found is through meeting right people inside different organisations, there are sustainability strategies, and there are KPIs around emissions and things that companies are wanting to do, and there are plans, and there are lots of really awesome people within organisations really gunning to do stuff, and so we've been really fortunate because we bring something tangible, and so a lot of people with strategic thinking and the research and the plan, but we're able to go, here it is, and it's like this and looks like this. So I feel like it's we're blessed with being able to sing from the same song sheet as a lot of other people are.
Now tell me
too much choir speak.
Tell me about the cargo bikes, because that did genuinely come out of the lockdown, didn't it?
Yeah, totally. And I think what triggered it was some restaurateurs getting in touch with us saying, hey, how do we can we borrow some bikes to do some deliveries? So restaurants down in the viaduct, and we thought, sure, grab them, and then thought, what a great thing to help encourage small businesses to be able to get stuff to their customers in other ways. So using our sort of ride, we have ride to own plans. We do bikes from our rechargery on a per week model. So it's like starting from $30 a week, but for these cargo bikes or a fleet bike, it can be from $70 a week or $50 a week. So it's the sort of thing a small business can handle, and especially if you go, we'll pay that in deliveries straight away. So on K Road, Hallertau have a tap house there, and so Hallertau and Electric Chicken are doing deliveries of beer and hot chicken, which is who can say no?
It's a lovely combination. But can you see that being useful beyond hospitality? I mean, obviously hospitality is an easy one, but do you see it as being something that applies more widely?
Yeah, 100%. So Heco, New Zealand manufacturer, do e-bikes. They have a ute. I love it. It's just a e-bike ute, and it has a flat deck. So it's the sort of thing that you can, if you're a tradie, so if you're a Sparky or something or other, and you're getting around town, or a courier, or picking up junk and things, or so in Wellington, for example, there's Kai Cycle, who are recycling food and doing that on e-bikes. So lots of tradies and small businesses are doing deliveries and pickups. Instead of having that van or that truck or whatever, it's like a cargo bike is way better. And especially since we're moving to have 30k speed limits in central Auckland and central Wellington. So suddenly, I mean, driving a car is going to be the dumb option. Riding an e-bike is going to be the smart option. It's going to be pretty straightforward.
Well, I hope so. You mentioned Heco. They're one of the brands that you resell and hire.
Yep.
I think all the brands you work with are local ones, aren't they? Is that deliberate?
Yeah, oh, definitely. I think something we've always been keen to, support and work with New Zealand businesses, and pragmatically as well. There's the manufacturers here on the ground; they can service them. When you talk to them, they can sort it out. You know, it's not dealing with someone way down the line. So, and it's been great, sort of being on a journey with them in terms of, seeing how the products have developed.
Talking to people in the business, all I hear is that we need more bikes. The supply is actually quite constrained, and everyone's waiting on new shipments. Are you seeing that? Yeah,
absolutely. I would not to sound like a retail lad, but I'd get in now. There's a waiting list, and otherwise, so August is, there is stock around, but because, and I think I was saying it earlier, electric bike imports are about to overtake car imports into the country, which is, I've got a graph here that Oliver Bruce shared with me, which I could show.
Okay, show us that, and then I'll go to Rachel for a bit of comment on that. So show us your graph.
There you go. Nothing better than a good little line graph. Oh, wrong one. Hold on. How do I stop that? Pause share. Oh, now I've lost them. There, this one. There you go.
Wow.
See that? And yeah, so it's about to cross over. In fact, an interesting little figure was that during quarantine, for obvious reasons, there were no car imports, which had a great effect on, and obviously no petrol coming into the country. So it had a great effect on our balance of trade. We had a surplus, which was a fantastic thing. So that makes a pretty simple equation. I'm no economist, but that's a pretty good equation.
Yeah, that's all good. You can unshare that now. Rachel.
Yeah.
You mentioned, wanting government and regulators to do the right thing. Certainly in Auckland, where Cleve's based, some of the right things have happened, but if you look at the Auckland Council budget, there's no all those proposed cycleways have gone. What can you do about that?
Yeah, I find it really distressing. One of the problems we have in Auckland is that we had such a diverse stream of income for the city, and a lot of those income streams have disappeared, right? So they've been forced to try and make some decisions about either taking rates up or massively reducing. So they've gone out to all their management team and asked them to which bits do you cut, and obviously somebody in their wisdom has decided that those are cycleways, which I think is extremely poor decision making in a world that's moving away from moving cars. We should make it harder for people to use cars and much easier for walking and cycling, not the opposite now. We're built into generational infrastructure right now that once you put down a road, it's there for a very, very long time. We should not be doing that. So I think we have an absolute imperative to let people know that we want those cycleways to stay in the budget. But I also think for Aucklanders, I don't know how far this goes, but in terms of other councils, but we have to be prepared to pay more in our rates, because Auckland rates are not high enough, which I know for a lot of people is just bollocks, because I don't know if you saw they released some of the high salaries in Auckland Council, and that made people very angry. I was angry about that, but I still don't want to lose those services. And unfortunately, the salaries are not really material to the spend of councils. So if we want those things to happen, we need to pay more rates. But I think we should also encourage the council, even if it isn't a material thing, to reconsider its wages.
Right, Samantha Jones, you did something with Little Yellow Bird as the crisis was approaching that you haven't done before. You had a sale. Talk me through that.
Yeah, so with our primary customer base being in hospitality and tourism, we saw a bunch of orders cancel in the lead up to lockdown, and we knew that we had to do something quite different to survive. And so although we hadn't predominantly been an e-commerce business, everything for that was set up, and we did sell a little bit through our e-commerce site, but we did a 50% off sale, and it's the first sale we've ever done, store-wide sale, and we were really transparent about the reasons why we needed to do it. And that was basically that we had invested heaps in stock preparing for growth. We had a warehouse full of stock, but we didn't have really good cash flow to see us through a crisis. And the impact of that was that we had a huge uptake in our online sales. We had more sales in a couple of weeks than we did over the previous 12 months through that channel. And that's been able to see us through, ensure we have enough cash flow to pay wages, keep everyone employed, and continue with our commitments to our suppliers.
Was that a big change for you selling direct to customers? Because you usually go through conventional retail, don't you?
Not too much through retail. We're more of a B2B business. So we have about 400 sort of business commercial clients that we sell in bulk to. And then about 10% of our revenue prior to COVID-19 was through our online e-commerce kind of selling to individuals. And then over the lockdown period, we were pretty much 90 to 100% selling through individual orders through our e-commerce store.
I was quite struck that all this is quite well explained on your website. You publish a journal. You keep. I get the impression you like to keep customers up to date with your story. Do you think that's important for the kind of business you are?
I definitely think it's important for the kind of business we are, but I do think it's actually just generally important. And what we've found is transparency being a core value in how we produce and manufacture our products, that kind of translates through to everything that we do. And so we're really open and actually share the journey. And for me, in terms of creating change, if we can share as much of this as possible with other people wanting to make change, then perhaps we can all make change together more quickly. And so any mistakes, and as any business owner could probably attest to, we all make mistakes during this journey of creating businesses. And so if other people can avoid some of the mistakes I've made, then I'm really happy to share that learning.
And the other thing you did once you'd shored up your own business was you've attended quite closely to your international supply chain. You really want that to stay up, I gather.
Yeah, well, for me, I haven't spent 5 years working on building these partnerships and relationships to see them all crumble. And for us, we have to think of this as a long-term, what's the long-term benefit? And so if we were to cancel orders or stop working with our supply chain that's already there, then it might make our business more profitable in the short term, but we won't have a business in the long term. And for me, we're here for the long run, so it makes sense to continue supporting and doing everything we possibly can to work with our suppliers during this time.
You didn't just not cancel orders, you actually also, anyone who bought your clothes was also buying meals for the workers, largely women, who make the fabric in India. How were you able to work that?
Yeah, so with that, actually, the people that manufacture our products were largely looked after from the systems that were in place. But migrant workers in India were largely sort of forgotten in terms of being able to access any kind of government support. And so what we did was we partnered with a local organisation over there, which was providing meals for migrant workers. And initially we did 10 meals for every mask that we sold, and then we extended that to every product. And so we were able to supply 17,000 meals over lockdown for people in India, which is where our primary production base is. Not necessarily people working on our products, but just in recognition that while we were producing some products in New Zealand during this time, our primary kind of impact mission is still centered around India, and so being able to do something to support those communities during this time.
So you made masks too. How many masks did you make?
Maybe 600 or 700
right.
masks.
Were they pretty ones?
They were. We actually were able to make them as a zero waste product. So, you know, in the process of manufacturing product, we do get samples and seconds and products that we can't use, but it's brand new fabric. So we actually were able to repurpose that fabric, turn them into masks, and they were all made here in Wellington, and then sold through our online store, and providing meals through those masks as well.
Now you have that ethical international supply chain, but of course everyone has been lately talking about buying local and thinking local. Have you moved into that as well?
Yeah, so I mean, diversifying our supply chain has always been on our agenda, but when you're a very small company, you kind of have to focus on one area specifically and one product line. And as we've been growing, it's been in our sort of long-term strategy to do a different product line. And with a lot of our regular business not happening, we've also had a bit more time to bring some of those plans forward. And so we haven't actually officially even announced it on our Facebook, but we are about to launch a Made in New Zealand collection. And when we looked to make something in New Zealand, we also were really conscious that we didn't want to take any work away from our current suppliers. And so we looked also, part of the reason we manufacture in India is because our raw material is, cotton is grown in India. And so when we looked to make in New Zealand, we looked at what raw materials were here, and obviously merino is a very obvious choice. It also sits really well with our B2B side of our business and providing uniforms, with a lot of large companies needing those as base layers. And so we are about to release a new collection which is Made in New Zealand merino, and we've partnered with ZQ Merino, who I believe are the most ethical, have the best standards for on-farm management and animal welfare as well.
Well, I like a bit of merino. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Rachel Brown, the issue of supply chains is a really interesting one. I wonder whether this has been the time for everyone to think about how they're sourcing.
Yeah, it has. It's really interesting. One of the big companies in the Waikato, long-standing firm, did what most companies are, some still doing, but have done, like a manufacturing base in New Zealand has just been dropping over years, and they've offshored lots of their supply. But what they're finding now is there's a bunch of triggers that are making them get local again. So for one particular company, they were saying that they were importing a particular I think it was a wire that's a coated thing. And what they're having to do now is pay additional costs to landfill this stuff. They didn't used to have to pay it because they could send it back overseas, but now we're not allowed to do that because China doesn't want to take, and completely fair enough, doesn't want to take our rubbish. So now they're going, well, maybe if we could find a local supplier who's willing to help redesign this, we could actually do a new circular approach here where we could design it with the idea that you could pull it apart and remake the component parts back into what it's originally designed for. Whereas in past, you would import it, get it fairly cheaply, come back and send it back into someone else's landfill fairly cheaply. So those models are really being challenged right now. And I think that's so sensible, because if we end up with massive storm events or climate events that affect global supply chains, it's going to be super tricky for New Zealand to morph if we don't have that skill set here.
The finding a local supplier thing is interesting. I mean, do we need better ways of doing that? Because you don't have many manufacturers, do you, as members?
No, and partly because they're all going. You know, I remember when Macpac made that decision to send all its stuff offshore. I mean, it's not the only one. Who's that other company? I've just forgotten the name. Sam will know them. Been here forever, making merino sportswear. They went offshore as well, started making it here, and then they made it offshore because it's so much cheaper for them. Different reasons for Sam, but I think we need to rebuild our local manufacturers. We need to diversify the kind of things that we do in New Zealand. Tourism has peaked and troughed, and frankly, a lot of people were sick of the scale of tourism and the impact in places like Christchurch. So now's our time, I reckon, Russell, for us to think about bringing that back, creating skills in our youth so that they can be creative again, and do it really differently. Do it so it's circular. Do it so we're not creating a waste stream for future generations.
Well, with waste streams, I think that's our cue to bring in Fionna Gotts of Junk Run. Welcome, Fionna.
Morning, Russell.
What happened for you when most of the economy paused? I mean, we stopped throwing things out. Did your business stop?
Yeah, that's always quite exciting when people stop throwing things out, but from a business perspective, quite hard to sustain. So what happened for us was things started to quieten down quite a bit leading up to going into level 4. I have men and trucks sitting around, so I sort of put my thinking cap on and went out and approached some of our bigger clients, and specifically the DHBs, which we do work for on a sort of, solid waste basis, and put our hands up to help them with condensing wards and putting stuff into storage and just moving stuff around the place. And we set up some COVID management facilities, and it was incredibly interesting to be doing and to be part of. And it was really nice not to be throwing things away. We were all quite excited. But it was really necessary to diversify for the economic viability of the business going forward. And we're still doing that now. And I'm actually pretty focused on that side of the business and how we might make more of actually putting things into storage and where that storage might come from, so that there's a better pool and easier access for people setting up to get stuff that doesn't need to be thrown away, that could actually just be in storage instead of we just got to stop and think about our procurement and how we do it and why we're doing it, and stop being so bloody vain about everything.
We've spoken before. You hate throwing things away, don't you?
I do, which is ironic considering I'm in the waste business, but it's probably the best formula. If only there were more people in waste that didn't like throwing things away. If there were some kind of drivers there or brakes even, it would be fantastic. Yeah.
Now, you are, on a slightly sadder note, you're the person who gets the call when a business fails and the site has to be cleared. Are you starting to see that now?
Yes, it's quite, it's a very sobering activity. Because you're often dealing with the people that have lost everything, and quite often mercenary landlords, property managers and that kind of thing. And there's perfectly good fixtures and fittings and really, really cool, fantastic stuff. And everything's being smashed out and with a focus on making good all of the time, which is basically taking facilities and spaces back to bare walls, which is incredibly unnecessary. And one of the biggest challenges for us is like, we go, oh my God, that's just absolutely fantastic. You can't throw that out. It's solid timber, or it's and it's beautifully constructed, and trying to find somewhere for that to go, or for somewhere for it to be held so that somebody else can use it is a really difficult juggle. One of the most important things at the moment, I think, and as you've all touched on, what a great opportunity for us to change what we're doing.
So the change there would be, I guess, is landlords and property owners not immediately stripping out a shop, just leaving the fixtures and fittings in there in case the next tenant wants them and doesn't have to spend 100,000 buying them again.
100,000. One of the facilities, one of the retail outlets that we were involved with the dismantle / demolition of, was probably a $400,000 fit out. And that's insane. It's like, why can't somebody come in here and actually benefit from all of these wonderful top end fixtures and fittings, instead of them all being ripped out and recycled, which I'm not an advocate of recycling particularly. I see it as part of the problem in this country. But if it was just left there, or if there was just a bit more global thinking, and this climate that we're in now is a brilliant opportunity to rethink some of that stuff and not go dashing back to normal. What is normal wasn't sustainable environmentally or economically. It's like Rachel touched on earlier on, there are so many people doing so badly. and the environment is really not benefiting from any of the activities that we're involved in.
What would you like to see change? Is buying better in the first place a key thing, do you think?
Smart procurement. It always starts with procurement. Yeah, starting by thinking about where your product comes from, what it's manufactured of, and who's manufacturing it. How well are those? How sustainable are the activities around that? You know, not just the human element. You know, we need to get back to humanity and nature and stop spinning wheels and really start thinking about buying local, buying top quality, because that's what's going to sustain us. And we have a unique opportunity in this country. My God,
is there a case for buying with reuse in mind, buying for the next person?
Yes, you've got to be thinking about the product. When you're purchasing, think about its whole life cycle. Don't think about what it's going to do for you today. Think about where it's going to end up, how long it's going to last you. Is it going to end up in landfill? Is it something that could be repurposed or reallocated or gifted or whatever? You know, we have those conversations on a daily basis. And disturbingly, we have them with large organizations that claim a lot of sustainable practice. As Rachel said earlier on, a lot of box ticking. Pretty damned easy to do box ticking and make up fancy words about things. But there's not a lot of follow through. There's not a lot of joined up thinking in where your waste ends up. So, yeah, I mean, we do a lot of work for the big corporates, you know, and some of them are starting to improve a little bit. But then we get on to products like MDF, you know. What are we doing? Why are we using such a toxic product that ends up in the ground because nobody can do anything else with it? It has a teensiest, weetsiest lifespan and it's designed that way. I mean, it's a cynical approach to consumerism. And we really ping people for MDF. We make it really painful experience because it doesn't matter whether we get the job or not, or whether it goes into a skip bin, it's going to end up in the same place, which is the black hole in the ground. Terrible. Affects our water table. I mean, it's, you know, there's no way it doesn't leach. We know that. And we're not learning fast enough.
Is there, I mean, there are going to be new businesses and, you know, hopefully sooner rather than later. Can those businesses join the circular economy you're talking about at a different point and actually buy pre-loved fittings? You know, is that easy to do?
Yes, it is easy to do. We deal with some second-hand traders, and we provide quite a lot of product to second-hand traders because there are no other community conduits for it. That's going to get harder and harder as we see quite a few businesses downsize, and there will be some downsizing going on. There'll be a lot of office space. Or a lot of office-y bits and pieces, you know, desks and tables and chairs and all that sort of stuff that will be cleared out of offices. And there needs to be somewhere for those things to go. There are, you know, there's places like George Walker who we do deal with, and they're like third generation family business. And they're finding this pretty hard and pretty tight right now because nobody's buying anything like that. So what happens to it then? Can we afford to store it? Probably not. Storage is excruciatingly expensive, as is real estate. So where's it going to end up? In the ground. Worse than that, it'll end up being recycled. I'm not even sure which is the lesser of the evils anymore.
Rachel, that's one of your messages, isn't it? That be aware that something happens to those goods after you don't need them, and you should think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always been a thing for me. You know, when I was a kid, my dad taught us to drive by inorganic rubbish collections. You know, he would be walking along the road looking for treasure, and we would be reversing and going forward as kids. You wouldn't be allowed to do it now; it'd be terribly illegal, but you could then. But I've grown up with that way of being. My house is filled with secondhand goodness. For some people, that's not okay. For me, it's a delight. I love history and things. And as a result, I'm not quite a hoarder, but I certainly do have too much stuff in my house. And it's not because I buy shitloads of new things, but anyway, yeah. And so my thing is always, what am I going to do with this when I don't need it anymore? So I have an electric bike, Cleve, and I don't own it. I have no desire to own it. I want to give it back when I'm done with it, because I wouldn't have a clue what to do with a bike at the end of its day. Yeah, so things like that, I think it's a critical shift. All my clothes, apart from a few that recently I bought from Sam, are secondhand. I'm also a keen sewer because that's one of the crafty things I do, but I just think we really need to change. I think we have lost the plot. As humanity, we have completely lost the plot. And this is our wake-up call, one of them. There will be more. And I think, people noticed cleaner air, quieter surrounds. Walking was beautiful. Cycling was just terrific during lockdown. And now we're seeing, people are like, bum, we've gone back to normal. But actually, you've got to remember, we create the environment we're in. So if we're getting back into cars, we are also doing the same thing. So I really think we need to change.
I can confirm that riding down the middle of Ponsonby Road was an absolute delight. It was beautiful. We're going to move now to some viewer questions. One for Samantha. Is there scope for other clothing and fashion manufacturers to move into local production in the post-COVID world, whether in manufacturing or sourcing materials, and what are the challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think there totally is, but as Rachel said, we do need the infrastructure there to support it. But the more that people demand it, then the infrastructure will come. We used to have it, so I don't see why we can't see a resurgence of that. I think one of the big challenges with local manufacture, and this is often like a misconception, is that often the raw materials are still coming from somewhere else. So even if it's New Zealand made, like we don't grow cotton here. So the manufacturing is only one small part of actually creating a product. So for us, when we look at the manufacturing of our product, it doesn't just stop and start with how it's stitched. It's actually, where did the cotton come from? How was the cotton grown? What were the farming inputs or infrastructure? So, our cotton is rain fed, for example, which really minimizes the impact of it. So I think one of the challenges is being able to look at that whole supply chain, which is a really difficult, the further you go back, the more complicated it gets. And so I think partnerships and collaborations will be a real key in overcoming that. We already supply and do manufacturing for half a dozen other brands, and I see that we will do more of that, particularly around providing the raw material and the inputs for other people that want to manufacture, or even manufacturing from home. So there's lots of opportunities and restructuring of how we do things, and I think that there will be more different pivots and ideas that emerge in the coming months.
I hope so. It sounds intriguing. And a question for Fiona. This is an interesting one. Is there a channel other than the George Walker types for startup businesses to access materials in the same way that we've seen food upcyclers, the likes of Kibosh, who were very active during lockdown, redistribute some surplus food? The similar principle there, isn't there? Let's not waste that.
Yeah, not
do we need a network for this?
Well, I think Trade Me sort of fills some of that network. But yes, it would be absolutely fantastic if there was a network in which we could have some kind of circular movement of all of these products. But again, it would have to go back to the quality of the product, because you dismantle an MDF desk, you kind of do it once and it turns to mush. So yes, good quality product. But then there are people that need to be able to get a livelihood out of that, and I think that's kind of it's a difficult balance. I still firmly believe that if you've produced waste, you must absolutely pay for its removal and disposal. And obviously by picking somebody like Junk Run, you can kind of ensure that the best possible outcome will occur. But there's going to be a glut of it in a minute. And I don't know where it's going to go. I mean, in my business, I'm already sort of finding that's a bit of a stress point. I've been to places like George Walker and all of the other people that we have arrangements and partnerships with, and I said, what can I do for you right now to help you keep your business on track? So, for example, you know, we're taking all of the waste that we're picking up, we're taking it to one specific place where it's a small business. We want him to survive. We need like-minded people to survive. I've been to George Walker and I've offered them men and trucks because I've got them, and we're not actually, you know, we're certainly not working at capacity. We're much quieter than we have been. So I'm just trying to find ways of doing that. And I've been trying to find some storage facilities and you know, and try and do a better deal with all of that so that we can actually have somewhere for it to go. It's resource recovery, really, isn't it, Rachel? It's all about the resource recovery. And at the moment, we've got resource recovery facilities put in place by the councils for residential waste, I want to call it, junk, you know, things that you've finished with. But, you know, and that's going quite well, but it's getting that at a commercial level would be absolutely incredible for construction and all that officey type stuff.
Right, thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, we could stop bringing in, you know, piles and piles of MDF to assemble them and make them into a desk, which lasts you no time.
I don't think you like MDF. We've actually raced past our 45 minutes. And I think, Cleve, you haven't had a word to say. I've seen you applauding what everyone else is saying. You got any final words? What have you learned? I guess, in general, in starting the business you have, because you've never wanted to be just a bike seller, and out of this lockdown experience.
Yeah, we've always just seen bikes as vehicles for social change. And we're experiencing massive social change right now around the world, and not just environmentally and health, but also in terms of social justice as well. There's a whole lot of forces at play, and yeah, there's a time of great sea change. And I think I applaud everyone on here and what the ideas that have been put up are amazing, and I think yeah, we'll keep peddling and making a lot of noise about it, yeah, and get rid of the MDF.
Right, well, thanks, and thank you all. This has been fascinating. I think this is my favourite of our Pivot Reports episodes, and that is the end of this episode, and the end of this series for now. We'll hopefully be back in a slightly different format because it's a different world, but until then, thank you very much to Spark Lab for making this possible. Thank you for watching, and thank you to all our guests. I've been Russell Brown. Heco.